Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Categorically Romance podcast. My name is Bree, and I am joined by the author, Christy Jeffries, today. Christy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So we're recording this. We're a few days into the new year at this point. How has 2024 started for you so far?
It's been pretty good. I'm from Southern California, so weather-wise, we've been really good. It's a hinge cold for us, but I think it would be very nice for anybody in Montana, for example.
Yeah. I'm in Texas, and we're kind of quote unquote preparing for a freeze, but I'm like it's already kind of warming up today. So it's is it really going to get as cold as they say it's going to get? We'll see.
Yeah.
Well, okay, let's start off with a couple of icebreaker questions. So if you came with a warning label, Christy, what would it say?
Mouthy. Well, I mean, you think that I look very sweet, I look very nice, I look very soccer mom-ish, but I can be a little bit of a sassy back talker sometimes.
I think every girl needs a little sass.
Yeah.
Tell me, tell me one of your most read authors. Like, if you look at your personal shelves, who can you say, yep, I've read just about every book that I have by them that I own?
Ooh, I love Tessa Dare. I love Sarah McLean. I love Ellen Hildebrand.
Oh,
Who does all those Nantucket-based beach books. Kristen Hanna.
I bought my first Ellen Hildebrand. What was the 5-star?
Oh, the 5-star weekend.
Yes, I bought that one this summer, and I haven't read it yet, but I was like, I don't know what it is about this book, but I need this book. So I guess I'm saving it for the right time. I don't know what it is, but I feel like it's going to be one of those books when I get into it, I'm going to be instantly obsessed. And I hear nothing but wonderful things about her book. So I'm excited to dip my toe in.
I know. She's good because she does a point of view from each character. And so just when you're thinking, okay, I really don't like that person because they're the nemesis of the character I do like, she does it from the point of view of the nemesis. And you're like, oh, actually, okay, I get where she's coming from. I see why she's being so she's really good with point of view.
That makes it sound like it'll be quick reads then, because then you're so invested. So I'm excited. Do you have a favorite trope to read? Is there a buzzword for you?
Historical. I love historical. I love a Scottish Highlander, especially if there's kilts involved. I will always gravitate toward the cover with the guy in the kilt.
Yeah. Well, I love hearing romance origin stories. So tell us how you became a romance reader and eventually writer.
Okay, so in 8th grade, my mom got called in for a parent-teacher conference with my English teacher, and was not doing well in the class at all. And the teacher asked me, Christy, you're not keeping up with the assignments, you're not reading the stuff you're supposed to read. And I've always tested fine in everything, but I just didn't. I told the teacher, I said, I don't like reading. I just really don't enjoy it. And she looks at my mom and she's like, this is going to be a problem. We got to get her reading. And my mom gave me a Danielle Steele book.
Shout out to mom. Okay.
Yeah. Called Palomino. And maybe I was a little bit too young for it, maybe. but I mean, I just I read it and I was like, whoa, maybe I do like reading. And so, I mean, I remember even in high school, I always had a book. I had, and it was it was all romance all the time. I had a lot of Johanna Lindsay's books, and I would go to the beach, or I had a boyfriend who played basketball pick up basketball at the parks. And I would take a little lawn chair and I'd go to watch him play, but I wouldn't watch him. I would end up reading my book, but I would take the hardback cover off or try to disguise what I was reading because I was still in high school and a little bit young. But yeah, my mom got me started with the Danielle Steele in 8th grade.
Oh, I love that. So at what point did you realize you wanted to write stories of your own? Because I was looking online. I always look fiction database. I was like, when was Christy's first book? And I'm seeing 2015, 2016. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So when did the writing bug hit you?
It never really hit me. It was more, I was working for the probation department, and I was going out in the field, and I had just had my second son. And so I just returned to work. I was breastfeeding, so I was pumping, and I would have to take off all my gear, like the Kevlar vest and my gun belt, and pump. And I'm like, I can't, this is just not working. I was having a hard time being away from my son. And my mom is Judy Duarte, who also writes for Harlequin. And she had, I told her, I'm like, I don't think I can keep working. Like, my son's only 5 months old. I'm having a really hard time being away from him. It's just, I don't like it. And she said, well, why don't you be a writer instead? You can stay home with your son and you can write books. And I'm like, I've never written anything. I did go to law school, so I know how to write, but I know how to write legal stuff, and I know how to write court reports and court briefs and argumentative stuff. I didn't really know how to write romance, but she signed me up for a RWA workshop, and she just kind of pushed me, like, in a really subtle way. So I'm like, yeah, you know what, maybe I can do this, and it lets me stay at home and be with my kids during the day, but I can also write a little bit. And then it just kind of blossomed from there.
Shout out to mom. That is the coolest. So one thing that I was like really excited to talk with you about was your law enforcement background, because I was a military police officer, and I'm like trying to teach myself to write, but I struggle with voice. I'm like, you sound like you're interviewing somebody all the time. So what advice or guidance do you have on, like, just talk about finding your voice? Because I think if you do have a background like that, where sure, you do write a lot and you do talk to a lot of people, I think maybe that is like a career path where, I don't know, I feel very self-conscious. Like, you're proud of all the work that you did, but when you try to veer into another lane where voice is so important, you don't want your voice to necessarily sound like that unless you are writing like thrillers or something, I'm sure. So
Yeah.
what did you learn in your experience when you did go to RWA, or just like you've been writing now since 2015? What have you learned along the way about voice?
My biggest thing with voice is when I'm writing, I pretend like I'm having a conversation with my best friend. And so when I'm writing the story, it's kind of like something big happened and I'm telling my best friend about it. And I'm like, ooh, like, you wouldn't believe what happened. And so I try to tell it more in a conversational tone. And so if I can hear myself saying it, or like telling it as a story, if I were out for drinks or out with friends, that's kind of how I tend to write it. So I'm not so by the book. But then there'll be times where I'm like, okay, I need to get a little bit more specific and more technical than I would normally speak, and I can't be throwing in all the extra stuff. But that's how I found my voice, is just trying to have a conversation.
So mom, we have to like shout out to mom. She gave you the Danielle Still. She signed you up, and really like pushed you and encouraged you. And that is just so inspiring. What was the journey to getting published like? Like, we have this backing, we have this support. How did we get the first book on shelf?
Okay, so I wrote a book that was more of a YA about a girl in juvenile hall. That was the first book I wrote, and it was very rough, but it was an idea that I had, and I had worked in juvenile hall way back in the day, so I had a pretty good grasp of that background and that setting. And my mom said, okay, let's send this to my agent and see if she likes it. And so I sent it to the same agent that my mom was at. I feel like I'm a total Nepo baby for saying this. But the agent was like, you know what? It's good. Let's change some stuff, and then I'll send it to some publishers. And I changed it up a little bit, and nobody bit right away. And the agent said, you know what? Like, your voice is a little bit more geared toward this genre. It's not so much YA, but it's maybe more a special edition, a Harlequin book. Why don't you try to write something that's not YA, and let's see if we can sell it. And so I kind of came up with an idea pretty quickly. And I barely even remember pumping out my next book that was for special edition. And she submitted it to Susan Littman over at Harlequin, and I got the call.
I mean, 2015 was a while ago, but do you remember your I got the call story? Like, where were you?
I was having lunch with my grandmother. My grandmother was living with me at the time. And we were just out doing errands, and we were sitting on the patio of this soup and sandwich type restaurant. And my agent called me and said, "You sold to Special Edition." I know it was very exciting and like, okay, like maybe I don't suck at this. Maybe I'm pretty decent.
No, you don't suck at this.
Yeah. So, and sometimes I grapple with that because like when I tell people the story, I'm like, oh, my mom's an author. My mom, like I have the same agent as my mom. I have the same editor as my mom. And it does sound very much like my mom got me into the business, and she did. But I remind people like I wouldn't still be here if I couldn't produce.
If you couldn't do it, exactly.
Yeah, like if I wasn't making the sales and bringing in the money, like they would not keep me on.
This is the coolest story. I don't think I've ever had this happen where it's like there's a mom-daughter duo in the world of categories. It's so cool. And I just love, I'm still stuck on mom was like, "Oh, you don't like reading, huh? Let me give you this Danielle Steele." And it's like, oh, maybe I do like reading. Because you hear so much of like, I was sneaking my mom's romance. But when mom hands you the romance, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. And like, it didn't even occur to me back then, like, oh, my mom is reading this too. It was just, okay, this is good. And then I started finding stuff on my own. But.
Well, you have coming out next a Montana Mavericks novel, Sweet-talkin Maverick, which first off, the cover, I love what Special Edition is doing with these covers. And the cover to this book is just perfection. I feel like our cowboy is staring into my soul. So for anybody that's listening that has not, because I'm hoping that somebody that's new to category, new to Special Edition, has no idea really what the world of continuity is. As a writer who's written for this continuity before, how do you explain, or how would you explain what Montana Mavericks is?
Like the series, or how the continuity works?
Yeah, like, I mean, because I'm like, if there's some reader out there that's like, okay, I'm going to give category a try and I'm going to try Special Edition, and they go to Walmart and they see Montana Mavericks, I don't want them to be intimidated, right? But I want to hear from the writers themselves, like, what are they getting themselves into? Do they need to read the books in order? How would you explain it?
I've never felt like I need to read them in order. And when I write them, I glance at what the other stories are that the other authors are writing about so that I know, but I don't even really fully read them. I don't fully read their synopsis. So it's not really, it's a series in the sense where you could binge read them. And if you read them in order, you would probably love it. But if you didn't read them in order, you would also get hooked, because it's kind of like going to a small town or any sort of setting, and you have different characters. And this book is going to just only follow these two characters. And there might be a little sprinkling of past characters thrown in, and I remember this restaurant from this other book, or I remember that person at that store from this other book, but they're each their own character stories. Yeah. So it's new characters every time, and they have a totally new story. So there's a little bit of other backstory thrown in, but it's really each book is a whole brand new story.
So how would you give us your pitch or your summary for Dylan and Robin's romance?
Okay. So Dylan's very competitive, and his siblings they're getting taken one at a time and falling in love. And he's thinking, okay, if I can't be the first of them to be married, then I'm going to be either the last man standing. And yes. So he's determined to not get married, because he wants to be the top at something, whether it's the first or the biggest holdout.
Yes.
And
bless his heart. I just love him.
These guys, these guys who don't want to find love always end up finding it. And he's a salesman, and he winds up with a ranch that he really wants to have, and he wants to be successful at it because he's competitive, but he doesn't know what he's doing on this ranch.
He has no idea what he's doing.
Yeah. He grew up in this kind of like suburb area of Bronco, and he's got friends who have ranches, and he knows it's like, that's the thing to do. And if you want to make a name for yourself, in this town. Like, it's how big your ranch is and how much money you make. And so he's going to give ranching a try. And Robin Abernathy is kind of a small town girl who loves ranching. Her family has a ranch, but she's also got a little bit of a crush on Dylan. She's had this crush on him from afar. He doesn't really know who she is, and she decides she's going to make a move, and she walks into his car dealership and enters this baking contest that Dylan did. I feel like I'm kind of going.
No, you're doing great.
I have to like scratch some of this because I'm kind of running around. But she overhears him talking about his ranch, and she knows, ooh, that's going to be a mistake.
That was my favorite scene. I wanted to ask you, like, your favorite scene, because that one was mine. Because like you said, he's so competitive, and she like walks in there and she overhears this conversation, and she's like, yeah, you don't want to use that type of fertilizer. And he's like, I think I know what I'm doing. She's like, no, because it has this thing in there and it's really dangerous. And I don't know. I love situational comedy. And so Dylan not having a single clue what he's doing just made the book kind of funny to me. And here comes the girl that's always had a crush on him, like reading him his rights, basically. It was just so good.
Yeah. And she doesn't look necessarily how you would expect, an expert rancher to look. And then he looks at her name and figures out, oh my gosh, her family is like one of the biggest cattle families in Montana. Like, I looked really silly.
Do you have a favorite moment from the book, or whether like now that it's done, looking back on it, a favorite, or just as you were writing, like you really enjoyed writing a specific scene?
Oh, that's a good question. There's a Valentine's Day bake-off you know what? There's two scenes. Okay. There's a Valentine's Day bake-off that Robin decides to enter, and Robin does not know how to cook. She's great with horses. She's great with cattle. She is not great in the kitchen. And so it's when they're doing the bake off and she's trying to focus on it's kind of like the Great British Bake Off show. Mm-hmm. It's kind of staged like that. And so there's other characters who are from other books, and they're also trying to make their recipes. And there's just like a lot of back and forth and I think there's just like some funny side commentary going on from the secondary characters. So I loved that scene. I love the scene where they go to the cattle auction and Dylan's going to buy his very first bull. And Robin realizes that somebody's going to outbid him. And so she decides to put on an act of pretending like that they're going to buy a totally different bull. And I think I cracked up a lot at that scene because Dylan was just trying to follow along and didn't know what was going on.
Didn't know what she was doing.
Didn't know what she was doing. And it's so out of character for both of them, but they get the bull at the end, at the auction.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. I really love these two. Being the first in this continuity, how was it being book one?
You know, this was my first time being book one. I'm usually like book 5 or 6. So I'm always like the cleanup hitter at the end. And so everybody kind of already has everything established and I'm kind of coming in and filling in the blanks. But being the first in the series is, I don't know, it's kind of good because I got a lot of like, hey, let's do it this way or hey, let's do it that way. But I also have to give a little bit more backstory. Like, I think this is maybe one of the first books where I have a prologue where they're at the holiday or the anniversary party for the mayor.
Oh, the mayor, yeah.
And so you're setting up scenes for the rest of the books along the way. So that was a little bit different, but I liked it.
Yeah, I think you did fantastic. It's such a good book. I can't wait for everybody. Read it and message me so we can talk about it, you guys. It's so good. Are you working on anything now that you can tell us about, or like what's next from you?
I am working on my synopsis right now for another Montana Mavericks book.
Okay.
And it's going to be actually a cousin of Dylan's who it's set in a new town in Montana. And so readers are going to get to see a new town with a whole new cast of characters, but it also has Dylan's uncle Stanley and his now wife Winona Cobb, who's mentioned in the books a lot. So I'm working on that story now.
Well, I'm so excited. Can you share with everyone where we can keep up with you online? Do you have a newsletter? Like, plug all your stuff.
I know. Ooh, I'm so bad. I have a website, ChristyJeffries.com, but I'm so bad about updating that. The best probably is Facebook, Christy Jeffries on Facebook. And I'm pretty good with Instagram. So Instagram or social media is going to be the best place. I wish I was better at my newsletter and my website, but
no, I mean, you have to write books, so I get it. I totally understand. Yeah, you all cannot do all the things.
I know, I have to run the carpool.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really, really loved Dylan and Robin. So thank you for giving us such a wonderful book. And we will be on the lookout for what's to come. So yeah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It was great being here.